wondered so endless life filled with sin. I wouldn't let my dear Savior in. Then life moved in like a stranger in the night. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. Just like a blind man, I wandered alone. Worries and fears I claim for my own. Then like a blind man, then God gave back his sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I was a fool to wander and stray. Straight is the gate and narrow the way. Now I have traded the wrong for the right. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I got to get to my page. Down at the cross where the Savior died, down where for cleansing from sin I cried, there to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name, glory to his name, glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. I am so wondrously saved from sin. Jesus so sweetly abides within. There at the cross where he took me in. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. Come to this fountain so rich and sweet. Cast out your soul at the Savior's feet. Plunge in today and be made complete. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name.
Good morning. It's good to see you this morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. It's good to have our guests with us and also on Facebook and YouTube. It's good to have you here today. Today's going to be a little bit different this morning than jumping in, and we will be in Matthew chapter 26, but really tonight. And today, if you did not pick up any notes or you would like some, just slip up your hands and there'll be some deacons that will be more than happy to get those to you if you're a note taker, if that's how you learn. And so today, as I said, it's going to be a lot of listening, and because I deem it very important that you understand the background of what is taking place here so you can understand what's going to happen tonight as we go through phrase by phrase talking about the trial of Jesus Christ, and that's where we're at. For some of you that are just joining us, a couple quick things here. We're in Matthew chapter 26. We're in our 124th sermon. We've got about 12 left, and we'll be done with the book of Matthew. And so a little over 2.5 years, we've just been breaking down each passage and going through it. I think in all of that, I may have skipped 4 verses, and if I recall right. And so I wanted to break it down. So my goal has been to break down the whole life of Christ. Now, we've talked about the preparation and the death of Jesus Christ and what we're talking about, the arrest. And then we're going to look at in 27 and 26, the trials. Now, something that I want to let you know today is that my goal tonight is not to complete all the trials of Jesus. All right, if some people say there's 6, 7, 8, I'm just going to talk about the main 6. But we're only going to see the first part, only because Matthew only covers the first 3 in this passage of Scripture here. And so then there's a break, and then we go to the Roman trial. And so tonight we're just going to look at the Sanhedrin and what that looks like, all right? And then in chapter 28, we're going to see the victory over death and the instructions for the disciples of Christ departing. Now, I want us to see this today. If there's anything else that you catch today, is this. You're going to see an absolutely fair justice system. You're going to see that if there was a justice system that you wanted to stand before, this would be the one that I would say I want to join up. If I was being convicted or condemned or accused of a crime, I would want these people in their system to judge me, because their system was absolutely, extremely fair. However, we see that they are going to disregard their system. They're going to throw it right out the window in order to rush this unfair trial. If you look at our justice system, you're going to see that our founding fathers pulled a lot of our laws from this very system. You're going to be like, hey, we did that. We do that. We do that. Now, where is it that we get this legal system? Where is it that the Jews got their justice system from? God had established the justice system with Moses years and years ago. We find this in Deuteronomy chapter 16. Look at what God says is how a legal system is to be run. He said, you shall appoint for yourself judges and officers in all your towns which the Lord your God has given you, according to your tribes. They shall judge the people with what kind of judgment? Righteous. As righteous as a man and woman can possibly be. That's all we're asking for, is it to be done rightly. And then it says, you shall not distort justice. You're not to be partial. You're never to take a bribe, because it's going to blind your eyes and it's going to pervert the ways of the righteous. And then he says, justice and only justice you shall pursue, that you may live long, possess the land which the Lord your God has given you, and those who do not do this will surely die. God has laid it out, where the Jews are pulling their legal system from. In Deuteronomy chapter 16 through 18, he says, do it right and pursue after righteousness. If you're standing before a judge, all you're asking is do your due diligence to do it right, to be just, to be fair. That's what anybody asks in any trial. If you're standing there or if your neighbor's standing there, all we want is fairness across the board. Because when there is not fairness, there is what? Anger, right? Provoke not your children to anger. Why? Because sometimes parents can be fairer to one child than the other, and you'll see that anger come out because they see that there's more attention given to one. It's just, we do not like things that are not fair and across the board. And God says, in your legal system, you are to be fair. So let's look at the counsel of the legal system for those who may have never studied this. And I would say probably a lot of people have just never looked into the background of the legal system or what it was supposed to be. The Sanhedrin was the name of the legal system, the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin simply means this, a sitting together. That's the definition of Sanhedrin, coming together, sitting together. It is a council of men. Now, in a small council of a local town, one that would be big enough to have a synagogue, because there had to be a synagogue present in order to have a trial. So in order to have this, you would have at least 23 men in this small town in order to have a trial. If you were not large enough to have a synagogue and a trial and Sanhedrin, then you had to go to the next town. And now in Jerusalem, though, where Jesus was being tried, because it was so large, there were 71 men. So as I said, we know there were at least 600 Roman soldiers. If you remember, Jesus was in the garden. He had prayed, came back to his disciples 3 times. At that time, he damaged his heart, almost had a stroke. An angel ministers to him. He says, look, get up. It's done. It's already done in my heart. It's already ready. We just got to go fulfill it now. And he sees a bunch of torches coming through the olive branches. And we know that there were a cohort of soldiers, 600 plus men. And then we know that the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin and the high priest, we understand these people collaborated all of this. It is possible that many of the 71 that was there, which is a problem all in itself. There is possible between 800 and 1,000 people showed up to arrest Jesus. And so we know that there are 23 in a small town, 71, and consisting of Pharisees, scribes, and the high priest. Now, I thought about going into each of their jobs, but honestly, you probably don't care. You can look that up sometime yourself. But they all consisted of this council. Now, there was always an odd number so that there would never be a tie. If there's ever anything I want you to walk away with today, and it's this. This is the fairest system I've ever heard. They wanted mercy. They promoted peace. They promoted fairness. That's what I want you to walk away with today. Then tonight, we're going to see how they really responded. Now we're going to look here at some of the rules. And that's my goal today. That's my goal this morning. In part 1 is simply to look at how were they supposed to run a trial? How is this so just system supposed to be just? Let's look here. Number 1, what a criminal would have a right to. Number 1, the trial must be a publicly held trial. This was very important. This was never to be done behind closed doors. Everybody was supposed to know about it. It was marked, it was stamped, it was printed. It was supposed to be, everybody knew this person was on trial. Their whole goal is we want all the witnesses to come forth and testify. We do not want to see this person get killed. And this person must have a defense counsel. This is very important to understand. Just like in today, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held in court of law. You have a right to what? An attorney. Jesus had a right to what? A defense counsel. He had a right to an attorney, somebody to represent him, because Jesus was never allowed to speak and allowed the words to come out of his mouth to actually condemn him. They didn't want that. I'm going to talk about that wasn't even allowed. Not only this, The death penalty was allowed to be carried out only on the third day. Only on the third day. So if it was granted they went through the whole trial and, okay, we're sentencing you to death. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then you can be brought. And by the way, and then we're going to talk about, that's a whole nother process after the third day. Well, what was the goal here? And why did they say we're going to wait 3 days? By the way, this was a very swift punishment because they were following after the Old Testament law there too. That if you do this punishment, then we're going to see to it that the punishment is there swift. That's where the American legal system doesn't agree, right? It takes years and years and millions of dollars of supporting a person and whatever. However, by the third day, then it was carried out. But what was happening during those 3 days? All 71 members or 23 members, depending on the size of the council, what were they doing? They were on their knees. They were praying. They were fasting. And they were searching for any more witnesses that could possibly excuse the one who was getting ready to face death. You're thinking, that's the people I want working for me. I want them to do whatever it took to make sure that I got a fair trial. Not only this, Jesus had to have a defense counsel, or was supposed to, because his testimony, no matter how convicting it was never to be allowed in court. So if Jesus would have been on trial for murdering somebody, he would say, yeah, at 9:22 p.m. I murdered this person. And they would say, it's not allowed. He wasn't even allowed to say that. He wasn't allowed to, that would never be even allowed in court. He wasn't allowed to speak. Now remember all of this when we get into tonight. Not only this, we know that a painkiller was to be given. It was generally wine. What do we know that happened at the cross? We say a vinegar. What was that? That was simply a sour wine. And it was to be given to the person. And they would start this early because once they're accused, why? Because they wanted to numb the pain that they were getting ready to experience and going to the cross or going to whatever penalty they were. And there was a painkiller given. It was sour wine, usually mixed with, you ever heard of wormwood before? It's a bitter a bark that they would put and squeeze. They had a way of, it turned it almost into like an opioid. And so we see here that this would be given to them. And now every conviction would be based upon two witnesses. Where do we see that? Matthew chapter what? In the church discipline, we see what? By the mouth of two witnesses. And see here, you had to have two witnesses. That's what the conviction was based off. If one person came and said, Chris did this, JR did this, it wasn't enough. If only one person came forward, it wasn't enough. It had to be based on two witnesses. And so what you're going to see in the trial tonight, you're going to see that the Sanhedrin tried to give a resemblance of a legal trial. And they were doing everything they could, but before long they were like, you know what, it's not legal anyway, so let's just disregard the rest of the laws. And here's the amazing thing about these witnesses. This was a really interesting study. If you were a witness and you were accusing somebody of something very serious, enough for them to receive death, I will say this, you better make sure that you had your facts right. When you stood before this council and you accused somebody of something that would bring them death, you would say, I know 100% this is true because I saw it. And that's how it would begin, because here's the reason. That whatever you stood before the Sanhedrin and you accused a person of, and when you were lying, and you were found guilty of lying, then whatever punishment they were going to receive, they are now released, and you had that punishment. So if they were going to spend 10 years in prison for this crime that you accused them of, They are set free. Now you do the 10 years. Do you think you would know your facts before standing before the Sanhedrin if you were getting ready, if you were found lying? Do you think you would know what you were talking about? Well, what about this? What about capital punishment? Absolutely, same thing. If you were found lying at a capital punishment trial, you would then face the same punishment. So anyone who was lying against Jesus Christ, they should have been the ones going to the cross, and Jesus would have been set free. If I am accusing somebody of capital punishment, I want to be honest with you. I don't know about you, but there would be a time where I would be like, I just want to make sure that I really want to say all this. I would have to have my stuff right before I spoke. This is the seriousness that the law was written for, to protect those who were possibly innocent and to show mercy to those, even who weren't. And here's the other thing. If you were part of the two witnesses that said this person said this, did this, killed this person, whatever it was, at the day of their punishment, you were the one who picked up the rock and you started the stoning. You didn't leave it for somebody else to do. You were the one that started the stoning. Now, do you remember a woman who was caught in an act of adultery? And all the Pharisees stood around them and they had stones in their head. And Jesus knelt down and wrote something on the ground, whatever that might be. And he says, hey, whoever has sin without in them in their life, go ahead and what? Cast the first stone. Because what? That was law. That was law. This lady should have went through an entire trial. And he says, you're the one. If you're accusing her of this, go ahead and cast the first stone. And one by one, they began to drop them. Could you imagine knowing that if you go through the entire system yourself and you're a witness and it's a capital punishment trial, that you would be the one that would throw the first stone to kill this person? Wow. I'm going to be honest with you. It'd be pretty tough, wouldn't it? It'd be pretty tough to have any hatred. I mean, it would be very serious, and I want you to see that here today. Not only this, every bit of evidence from the witnesses would be read of the accused in an open court where everybody was invited to. When the witnesses were there accusing this person, all this information would be read out loud. Not only this, each witness would be required to affirm their testimony. Every witness would be required to affirm their testimony. Some of you have been in court quite a bit. Some of you haven't. I've been in court quite a bit because of the job and the counseling. And one thing that you will always hear a judge say, when somebody that is testifying, they'll say, well, that's what she said. That's what he said. Well, I heard from such and such, and you will watch that judge shut down that witness and said, I don't care what you heard. I want to know what you saw, what you were told, and I need you to be able to back this. Now go. You see, they had to be able to back what they knew to be true. Not presumptions, not hearsay. Now, how important, as you're thinking about Jesus Christ and you're thinking about his life, how important are every one of these rules? But not only this, if you were a witness, you had to know the year, you had to testify of the month, you had to testify of the day, and not only that, you had to know the hour and the location that this person committed this crime. You had to recall. So if there's a witness called in on me, they had to know exactly where we were standing, the year, the date, the month, the hour, the event, what was going on around. They had to be able to give every description so that the court was convinced that this witness actually knew you did what you did, what they say you did. How many of you so far want to be judged by this system? Everybody, right? We all want to be judged by this system right here, the one that God had established. Not only this, the council, the Sanhedrin, the 71, the 23, could not start a charge, could not initiate charges. Who had to do that? A witness, two witnesses had to come forth and begin the charge. The council could not walk into the garden and say, we're going to arrest you. The witnesses had to start this. Caiaphas and Annas, the high priest, they could not start this process. By the way, when did this process start? We know for sure, Jesus went into the temple and overturned the money changers 2 times, right? And after the second time, he said they envied in their heart and they began to search out a way to kill him. At that point, they broke the law because there were no witnesses that came forth to them. And this is interesting. A woman could never initiate the charge. She could not be the one that stepped forward and said, this is what I know to be true, on a capital punishment. The reason they did this was to spare a woman from picking a rock up and mashing a man's head in. They were sparing her from that. She could be a witness, but she could not initiate the charge because she would be the one to start the execution. I've often thought, well, what does that look like? How did they work through that? What if she was the witness? I don't know the answer to that question. It's interesting. There were some other people who were not allowed to initiate charges. Children, slave, and if you had some type of mental retardation in your mind, if you were a person of bad character and you already was known to be a liar, then you were never allowed to be a witness. You were automatically exempt from this. Not only this, there would always be a presumption of innocence of the accused, and giving great latitude to what? The defense, presenting the defense. I think this is interesting here. In the local council of a small town of 23 men, if all of them voted guilty, the prisoner was released. The prisoner was released if all 23 voted guilty. And here was the law. That means all 23 were out to get him. And therefore, there was no mercy, there was no justice shown, and this person was released. It's pretty interesting. Not only that, we see that if 11 voted not guilty, immediate release, no more votes. So, as I said, if found guilty, the accused was sentenced, would not be carried out for 2 more days because more evidence would be needed. I want to hear the whole case, and I want to hear the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Now, let's say that all the witnesses were there. They had great testimony. This person was found guilty. 2 days have now passed. We're on the 3rd day. We're going through with the procedures. This is how or what this looked like. This had to be a very solemn event. Can you imagine this happening today of somebody who was found guilty? There would be almost like a funeral processional. And this person would only be second to a herald. A herald is somebody who makes an announcement, right? And they would begin to walk through the street like a funeral processional. And they would slowly make their way down Main Street, going to where the person would be killed. Can you imagine what that would have looked like? Imagine seeing somebody on death row. And they're an hour before they die, and they are walking them through the street. What do you think that mood is like? Why are they doing this? Are they just trying to show, look, punishment, it's going to be swift. It's going to be fast. Don't be like this guy. No, absolutely, that's the furthest from their mind. What would happen is there would be an officer. There would be a herald, and there would be an officer on horseback riding beside the prisoner who was chained. And that officer on horseback would have his chains. And then there would be the counsel, the witnesses. The witnesses have to be there. They're the ones who are going to have to cast the first stones. But in the back, there was a man, and he had a flag. And he was carrying a flag in the very back. And so what this guy on horseback, the reason he was on horseback, he would look back at the officer carrying the flag, and then they would continue on very slowly. Then he would turn around and he would look back at the one carrying the flag. The herald was out in front. And I'm going to explain what all this looks like. The herald was going, this is Chris Davis, born this day. Today he has been sentenced to death. It has been to 3 days. He is accused of murdering such and such. If we have any witnesses for his account, we need them to come forward at this time. I say again, this is Chris Davis. We need any witnesses that would be in his defense to come forward. He will be sentenced to death in exactly 30 minutes. We need any witnesses to come forth. Please, we need the witnesses to come forth. He is going to die. Could you imagine what that was like? As that herald was pronouncing the damnation, the judgment, the death, but he was literally begging for witnesses. If there's anybody that can give any more testimony to this person's innocence, please do. If we can acquit this person, let's do it. Please, can you imagine by some sense that they had just missed it? The witnesses had lied. Can you imagine what the prisoner would have been doing if they were innocent? I'd imagine if it would have been me, would you have joined in with that herald? Please, somebody, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I imagine they would have joined in with them. And what about the men on the horse? What about the man waving the flag? What is that all about? So what the town knew, if you were a witness and you knew that you had evidence and facts to excuse this man, you would run to the officer in the back of the crowd. I have evidence. I know he didn't do this because I had just whatever. And as this man on horseback, he was looking back. The officer was waving the white flag. Whoa, 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 whoa. Imagine having that responsibility. What would you do? Stop! Stop! And you would be waving that white flag. Here's a person with evidence. And the whole processional would stop. And then the accused would be brought back to the synagogue, and we would start the trial all over again. Because we wanted to make sure that mercy and justice was at the forefront. Because Deuteronomy chapter 16, that's the way God had established it. Now, here's some rules, further requirements. No trial could be take place at night or in the evening. This is pretty amazing. So let's say that I was accused of murder, and I had a witness in the evening come before the Sanhedrin and say, hey, I know what Chris did. he killed this person, the Sanhedrin would bring the temple guards to me and say, you're officially under arrest. So what do we do this day and age? We're taken to jail. You know where they were taken? To their closest heirs, their closest family, and that's where they were located. Why in the world would they take them to a house? It was guarded because they were not what? Guilty. And they were not presumed guilty. So why should they go to jail? Until the trial was over. So they were taken to their family's house. Not only this, when there was a vote by the Sanhedrin, it was done from youngest to oldest, because the older men, the way they voted would have influenced the younger ones, and the younger ones would have followed suit. Nobody should have known how the other person was going to vote. And if the council voted unanimously, then the accused would be set free because mercy was not present. I think that's an amazing law, by the way. And if nobody knew how the other one was going to vote, or they were not to talk about it, then they would not know that they would all vote the same. Now we're almost finished. What happened at Jesus' trial? We know that Jesus was being tried without a charge. We know that Jesus was tried at night. He was tried in private. He was tried with no defense. And we know that testimony of witnesses, they had already been bribed to come forth. And they knew that they could be put to death, these witnesses. Can't you see the Sanhedrin going, look, I'm going to pay you this much money if you come forth and say that Jesus did this. No, I'll die for that. No, we're the council. We'll take care of it. Not only this, there was no waiting period. Jesus was executed on the same day that he was on trial. There was supposed to be a waiting period. There was supposed to be a fasting, but we know that the Passover was taking place that day, and they were not going to miss out on the Passover. The only thing legal that was done throughout this whole trial was this, that Jesus was given and offered a sour wine, a vinegar mixed with myrrh on the cross, where they put it in a sponge and lifted it up. And by the way, let me just paint this picture for you. Do you know who was drinking this wine, the sour wine? The Roman guards. And that's why they were mocking him, making fun of him, because they were drunk in the process. Tonight, we're only going to talk about, because Matthew only discusses right now the first 3 trials. This is not 6 trials. This is the 6 trials that he faced within the 12 hours. In 12 hours, he faced 6 different trials. The 2 major trials that I've already pointed out at one point, the Pharisaical law that was supposedly broken, where he violated the Sabbath law. They said that he threatened to destroy the Jewish temple, and he also claimed to be the Messiah. The results of this says that they did not find any witnesses to back up this testimony. They didn't find them. You know why? Because no witnesses came forth. Who was the one who got all this and collaborated all this? The Sanhedrin, the ones that were supposed to be judging him, in which they broke the law. The second major trial was the Roman law, which we're not going to talk about tonight. And this is what they said, because, by the way, they could not kill Jesus on their own. The Romans had to do it. And so they were not given the privilege of doing that. They said, we found this man misleading our nation. We found this man forbidding to pay taxes. We found this man proclaiming himself to be king, and we know only Caesar is king. What are you going to do about it? The results, Pilate said, having already examined him before, I have found no guilt regarding the charges which you make against him. We're already going to see that Jesus is innocent. It's going to be played out. We know this. And through the six trials, and I'm almost done, Jesus, first of all, tonight, we're going to talk about Annas and the high priest. And by the way, Annas was removed by Rome after just 5 years because of all the power that he gained, and he did not want to lose any of that power. We also see that Annas sent Jesus over to his son-in-law, keeping it within the family of Caiaphas. That was the presiding high priest. And then we see that he was brought before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin again right after daylight. Those are the three we're going to handle this morning. And last, we're going to see later on how he was brought before Pilate. We're going to see how he was brought before Pilate discovered that he was a Galilean. And because the governor was there, Herod, because of the Passover, he says, I'm going to send you over to Herod. We're going to talk about that. And then Herod then reluctantly sent him back to Pilate. These are the things we're going to look at. But tonight, we're only going to look at the first three. Annas, Caiaphas. And we're going to look at this, the 6 aspects of how this trial was so illegal. But I deemed it very important that you knew the background. Everybody in here would want to be judged off of this system if done correctly. Father, we love you today. We are thankful for your word. We're thankful for that you are a just, righteous God, and that was the intent of the law. We're thankful that you had wrote this out many years, but because of the wickedness in men's heart, we're not always just. We're not always merciful. God, we're thankful that you are. God, I pray as we come back tonight and we look at this first part of this trial, we'll see that your son was on. God, there's part of anger that sort of builds up because anytime injustice is done, there's anger, there's confusion, and we know that Satan was absolutely heading this up. Thank you for those who are here today listening online and in person. I pray that we would be struck by what we've heard in your word in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you this evening.